Noble Master Samael Aun Weor. Radio University, Radio Universidad. Mexico 1977. Interview to our Venerable Master Samael Aun Weor. Radio University, Radio Universidad. Mexico 1977. Q. Master Samael Aun Weor, we would like to ask you, what is the Gnostic movement and what are its objectives? A. The Gnostic movement is what currently takes care of Gnosis. Gnosis stands for wisdom and knowingness. It covers four aspects we could call science, philosophy, art, and transcendental mysticism. The objective of our Gnostic movement is to take the Gnostic teachings to humanity without making a difference between race, sex, origin, sex, or color. Gnosis coexists with all archaeological items, within every niche, pyramid, or tomb. What is interesting is wisely extracting Gnosis according to the rules of all archaeological items found not only here in Mexico, but anywhere around the world. Q. Master. As part of the Gnostic scientific teachings, a lot is said about the lost world of Atlantis. What could you teach us about this? A. For certain, Plato's Atlantis has stopped being a mere myth to become an effective, realistic fact. Recently, a group of scientists who parted from Spain were getting ready to explore Atlantis. It is well known by maritime experts that there is a platform on the bottom of the ocean between Europe and America. Unquestionably, that platform is Atlantis. Some other time, this continent existed and was inhabited by many millions of humans. It extended from the south to the North Pole and withheld a powerful civilization, but it later sunk to the waves of the ocean. Without a doubt, Atlantis disappeared as a consequence of another movement that exists and happens to this planet. I refer to the revolution of our Earth's axis, because there not only exists the rotation around the axis itself, nor the displacement, orbit, of our planet, there is another movement known by the astronomical sciences, and that is the rotation of our Earth's axis. So, when our Earth's axis underwent this tremendous periodic revolution, Atlantis submerged. The vertical switching of the poles was more than enough to cause the sea to change its beds, leading to bury Atlantis under the ocean. There is plenty of proof to the existence of Atlantis. For starters, let's remember vases and utensils found within the ruins of Troy, discovered by a German archaeologist. Vases made out of marble, ceramic, and stone, utensils, and materials with the signature of the King Kronos of Atlantis, and vases of the same kind with coins carrying the same signature of the king were found in Central America. Commemorative plaques of what happened in Atlantis are found in Lhasa, Tibet, and in Central America as well, where Atlantis is remembered as the country of the limestone hills that sank to the bottom of the ocean during a great catastrophe. Books from ancient groups, such as the Codex of the East and the West, remember in their sacred writings such event. In addition, our racial characteristics are by themselves more than enough proof to give testimonial to the existence of Atlantis. For example, here in our dearest country of Mexico, the Yucatecas. If we walk ourselves to an area like Toluca, we will find the oblique eyes, so common in the Japanese and Chinese races. This is more than enough proof to show us a common link between East and West, and obviously, such a link is the only thing that is able to explain the similarities among these races. Nevertheless, if we focus on language and refer to Atlas, from ancient Greece, carrying the world on his shoulders, Atlas shows the root of the Atlantis. This reminds us, precisely, of the submerged continent. As time elapses and investigations continue, more and more evidence will continue to demonstrate the existence of Atlantis. But what is most important is that these archaeological pieces will be brought up from the bottom of the ocean to eliminate any trace of doubt from those who still do not believe. Q. Master Samael Aun Weor. It has been said that those who inherited the culture of Atlantis could have been the Egyptians, or the Mayans, or maybe the Incas. What could you tell us about this? A. Well, Both the East and the West share the legacy from Atlantis. Without going too deep into this, let's remind ourselves that in Egypt exist Mayan pyramids. This by itself is absolutely amazing. We should not forget the Naga alphabet from the Tibet. The Mayan alphabet is similar to the Tibetan Naga, and there is even a phrase part of the biblical gospel attributed to our Lord Jesus. It is said that in the Golgotha he said, "Heli, Heli, lama sabachthani." The Jews asked themselves, what is he saying? Perhaps he calls for Elijah or some of the prophets. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him, while they bob their head making fun of him. The Jews did not understand the significance of this phrase. It was neither Hebrew, nor Sanskrit, not Tibetan. However, any Mayan scholar from Guatemala will be able to translate this immediately. The phrase means, for any Mayan from either from Yucatan or Guatemala, now I may submerge into the greatness of your presence. Jesus of Nazareth spoke the Mayan language. Obviously, the Mayan language comes from Atlantis, prior to that great continent submerging itself into the deepness of the ocean. The Mayan race had spread throughout the east and the west of this world. Mayans colonized the Tibet and Egypt, and we have that testimonial in the Naga alphabet of the Tibetans and in the Egyptian pyramids. That is how the East and the West inherited the vast knowingness of the Atlanteans. Q. Master Samael Aun Weor, back in 1947, in a series of caves or caverns near the Dead Sea, the famous scripts from the Dead Sea were found. What could you tell us about those scriptures? The scripts from the Dead Sea belong to the Essenios. Those metallic rolls of scriptures were pulled out from caves, and it was no easy task to neither interpret them nor translate them, particularly because the scripts had to be cut in small fragments. After much effort, the interpretation and translation were possible, and we have them under our custody. That is what matters. The scriptures talk about the knowledge of the Essenios, a Hebrew, Jew sect with outstanding ancient knowledge. Such sect lived close to the shore of the Dead Sea. The Essenios were wise in its utmost sense. They knew about the ancient teachings, and they were dedicated to the work on their self. It is obvious that they achieved great transformations within their psychosomatic, within their mystical, sensorial, and transcendental planes. They achieved the awakening of the consciousness. What else? Q. There is a theory that states Jesus Christ could have been educated and trained by the Essenians. What would make this a valid theory? Well, what has happened is that these scriptures quote the Master of Rightness, who existed some 5 centuries BC, and it has been misinterpreted who the Master of Rightness was with the historical Jesus, our great Master Jesus, the Christ. We also have to understand that this Master of Rightness cited by the Essenios is not necessarily a historical figure. Let's see him as a psychological individual prototype of the human beings. From this perspective, there should be no further confusions. It is also obvious that the superior being in each human creature, according to the ancient traditions that have been lost in the terrible night of all ages, is Christic in a great way. It is great shame that these teachings and learnings have been lost. It is because of this that this human race has fallen in such a way. No wonder in these times, Christ is seen as a historical figure, instead of translating it into the prototype of humane perfection in each and every one of us. Q. With the discovery of the Dead Sea Scriptures, a great deal of issues arose with the difficulty there was to decipher them, but I also understand a shroud of silence covered the subject. Could you tell us the reason behind that silence? Actually, people were enthusiastic at first for the discovery of the Dead Sea Scriptures, but that all stopped when people were not able to understand the meaning of such scriptures, and for a period of time, people forgot about them. However, there are people who still study them. I believe it would be the right thing to study them because they contain transcendental esoteric teachings that, when adequately understood, will shed light to many obscure corners of our comprehension. Q. Master. In all antique book, traditions, and legends, people have always talked about flying objects. In the Ramayana, for example, flying objects similar to flying saucers. All antique cultures talk about the same. We would like you to tell our audience, what kind of people live in those ships? Are they extraterrestrials? Did they live in our planet thousands of years ago, and for various circumstances they were forced to leave? Or did they go extinct, or did they disappear? We would appreciate if you told us something about this. With utmost pleasure, we will talk about all these questions related to extraterrestrials. To me, these are not theories or subjects of an utopist nature. I have had direct experiences with them, and I have known them. It comes to my mind, right at this moment, an encounter I had with extraterrestrials. I was at the Lions Desert here in our federal district of Mexico when all of a sudden an unidentified flying object descended on the forest. Moved by curiosity, I walked to the area to find an elliptical ship supported by a steel tripod. A porthole opened, and a man walked down a stairway. Around 11 other people followed him. All of them were slim and not too tall. Their foreheads were wide, eyes were blue with copper-like skin. I approached the man who I thought would have been the captain of the ship, the one who stepped outside first. I greeted him, and it was great my amazement when he replied back in perfect Spanish. I would have expected anything except to find extraterrestrials able to speak Spanish. All those who walked down the stairwell with him sat down in some logs that were in the area. I asked the captain, "I am a writer, and I would appreciate if you could take me to another planet." "To which planet would that be?" He replied back. "Mars," I said. "Mars? That is just right there." Another answer that amazed me. Right there. I asked myself, to what this man had replied with such easiness, as if it had been as easy as going to a corner store. All my requests were useless. I told him I wanted to write about the life in other planets, and bring back material proof to convince the people in our planet. I made it clear that Earthlings were skeptical about life in other planets, that they were non-believers and materialistic. That it would be useless for me to go to another planet without being able to bring back proof. Because even if I knelt down and shed blood tears from my eyes to convince them, they would still not believe, unless there was some material proof to demonstrate it. I had to bring them something, an apparatus, a rare rock, an animal, because they are incredibly skeptic and materialistic. Well, after saying all this, the captain remained silent. One of the ladies stood up and said, "If we place a non-aromatic plant beside another one, that is, one will impregnate the other with its smell, right?" "Of course," I said. "The same thing will happen with different worlds." She continued, "Worlds that in the past were suffering, with perverse humanities, were impregnated with the vibrations from neighbor worlds and nowadays are doing very well. But we have just arrived to this planet, and as you see, that does not happen. What is wrong with this planet?" The question was terrible. I had to reflect for a while. At last I said, "This planet has been a mistake from the gods," and went on to round off my concept stating, "This planet Earth is the karma of other worlds. Karma is an Oriental word that means cause and effect. To such cause, such effect." The lady agreed, and so did all the others. They stood up. I knew they were leaving, so I took advantage of the moment, and once again I repeated my request. The man looked at me and said, "On the way we will see," as he pointed up with his index finger. Then I understood what those men were, speaking little but saying a lot. For them, the word is gold. Those words made me happy. We stretched our hands, and all of them returned to the interior of their ship. I stood back at a prudent distance, considering the radiation could finish me right then and there, and I could see from a distance the very same instant when that ship started spinning in its axis and levitating, until it got lost within the infinite. This happened to me, and from that day, the subject on extraterrestrials is very serious. I am totally out of curiosity. I understood that to become an intergalactic traveler, I would have first to get rid of all my psychological defects. I know that until my dignity is not enough to become part of that crew, the only thing I can do is sigh. I am now dedicated to address and and eliminate all my defects. And one of these days the captain will return and stand up to his word. There is no doubt that the ship that descended within the forest was part of a mothership that remained in orbit. In one of the South American countries, a similar event happened, but with far more luck than mine. Certain person who was part of an Oriental, esoteric, school received a visit from extraterrestrials early in the morning. This person was taken on ship to Ganymede and was shown the civilization that existed then and there. The extraterrestrials even proposed the person to stay in Ganymede. Ganymede is a satellite that orbits Jupiter. Jupiter has 12 moons. However, the person was brought back to Earth upon his request. He wanted to give away all his material belongings to his brother. He was brought back. He formally handed everything to his brother: his house, his car, his money, everything. He invited his friends and family to a farewell dinner and told them he was on his way to a long trip, without even telling them where he was going. While they were having dinner, the ship landed in his backyard. "Oh, we understand," his family said. "Yes, they are here to pick me up. I am leaving on my own will," he said. He stepped inside the ship and left. What is interesting is that among the things he left his brother, he left him a mechanical apparatus, something better than a radio or a TV set, that would allow him to make contact by solely using the power of his thoughts with the people of Ganymede. Eventually, his brother was also taken to Ganymede. Our Earth cannot be the only inhabited planet. It would be absurd to believe that among all those billion and billion worlds that make up the infinite space, that only Earth, this grain of sand in space, will be exclusive enough to carry life. That would be a medieval mindset. That is similar to those who thought back in the Middle Ages that the Earth was flat, squared, and that it was static in space. Let's remember that Galileo was courageous enough to state it was round and that it moved around in space, and he almost saw himself burned at the stake during the time of the Inquisition. He had to swear, with his hand on the Holy Bible, when he was asked, "Do you swear that Earth is not round and that it does not move anywhere?" To which he said, "I swear, but it moves, it moves." On the same token, thinking that there is only life on Earth and that this is the only planet that carries life is to think with a medieval mindset. We must be intelligent and revolutionary on the way we think. Q. Master, you are making me reflect on issues I have always wondered. For example, much has been said about the secrets contained within the Great Pyramid in Egypt, where stellar dates were engraved for the times of our humanity. Nostradamus also cites these dates and events that are to come. My question is, does history repeat itself, or is it that men are able to predict their future? The Great Pyramid is marvelous. All measurements in the Great Pyramid are prophetic. In the Great Pyramid was prophesied, with entire clarity, the Second World War that took place between the years 1939 and 1945. World War I was also prophesied, and that took place between 1914 and 1948. The great catastrophe that approaches is also prophesied, and we are close to that one. Let's remember the Mayans, who are not as ignorant as some people think. They had great knowingness on subjects like astronomy, and they still do. At this time, they await the great catastrophe of Caton 13. The Mayan Caton is a precisely defined historical cycle. The previous 12 were met with mathematical exactitude, and the next one, the 13th, states there will be a great catastrophe that will change the geological physiognomy of our planet. It is obvious that if such an event happens, disaster will strike humanity, and this race will be extinguished in its entirety. However, I believe a small group will be saved. After every catastrophe, there are survivors. Why wouldn't it happen now? We know there is a gigantic, colossal world that is on its way to our planet Earth. I refer to the Tyler solar system. The Tyler solar system has a huge orbit. By the end of the Lemur epoch, it arrived, leading the Lemur continent to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. After 10,000 years of volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, the vast continent disappeared. Parts of that continent still remain, namely Australia and the Easter Island, off the coast of Chile. By the end of the Atlantis race, a revolution of the Earth's axis took place. Oceans changed their beds and swallowed the continent with its powerful civilization, and it comes again. It will bring with it a great catastrophe. I am talking about Barnard Eye, or Hercolubus. What I am talking about has been documented. In our institute, we have a cosmological map, not traced by us, but by astronomical observatories. It is an official map. In it has been drawn what will cause this great catastrophe. Hercolubus is a world 6 times bigger than Jupiter, thousands of times bigger than Earth, and it is moving towards our orbit. Once at a certain distance, it will draw the liquid fire from within the Earth. Volcanoes will erupt everywhere, and that liquid fire will burn everything on its path. Once at its closest distance, Hercolubus, or Barnard Eye, as known these days, will once again cause the revolution of the Earth's axis, similar to what happened to Atlantis. The poles will revert position and they will mark the equator, and the equator will mark the poles. The seas change their beds, and our current continents will submerge under the oceans. We're close to the end of our Aryan race. Without a doubt, new continents will rise from the bottom of the seas. I do not think all of humanity will perish. Obviously, there must be survivors, and there will be. There will be a small group of humans that will become the nucleus for a future race. But think for a moment that a great catastrophe is coming, that it is in the very same astronomical observatories that the map has been traced. This is official. If it has not been made public, it is because governments have censored the subject, trying to avoid panic. But this is official. This is known to the Mayans. While I spent time with them, I asked an elder, "Will your son see this?" "My son will not see this," he replied. "And your grandson, will he see this?" "Yes, my grandson will see it," he said. The Mayans are wise, to the full extent of the word. Those who dare to say they are ignorant is because they don't know anything about anthropology. Master Samael Aun Weor, I would like you to tell us about the law of socioeconomics. Socioeconomics is an interesting law. It happens that close to our ORS solar system exists the Betelgeuse sun that belongs to a neighbor solar system. Every now and then, this sun will come close to our solar system of ORS, increasing the electric tension of our solar system, of course, and as a consequence, the whole humanity suffers a heightened psychosis and extreme nervousness. This causes an electrobiological alteration in all living species, and that triggers bloodshed and revolution. People revolt, and disasters happen everywhere. Let's remember the French Revolution. It was caused because of socioeconomics. People revolted against Louis XVI, and the guillotine took care of most of the nobles of that country. That was terrible. The Russian Revolution of 1917 was another product of another socioeconomics. Some Gnostic masters were awaiting that socioeconomics and knew what would happen in Russia in 1917. Tsar Nicholas' head fell, and the Bolsheviks rose within the chaos, and there came the revolution. Those socioeconomics have always been terrible. There was another one in Egypt, and a pharaoh together with all his family died. They were impaled with steel cables and made a macabre necklace out of them. All the bodies were then thrown to the Nile. Very much has been said about pharaohs and their dynasties, but very little has been said of what has happened between dynasty and dynasty. During one of those Egyptian socioeconomics, a condition to become a pharaoh was to have the most eyes of nobles, in a vase. The one with the most eyes would become pharaoh. Think of what that meant. Every time a socioeconomics arrives in our world, things like these happen. That is the lay of socioeconomics. It is an electrical tension that causes alterations to the electrobiological responses of humanity, and as you can see, the result of these disorders is terrible. In our history, there have been cases of men we could call exceptional. I refer to the mutants. What could you explain about those cases, Master Samael? Yes, mutants exist, and you could transform into a mutant if you dissolved your ego, that's self. The ego or self is the source of disasters. It is a group of passions, hate, violence, resentment, lust, alcohol, etc. Once you are able to eliminate those defects, that self, only the being remains, and the reason for being is the being in itself. Once that self has been eliminated, the being remains in the absolute reign. Mutants are sacred beings. These are beings that manage to eliminate their self. They are transformed individuals. Becoming a mutant is possible, and we have methods and systems through which you can dissolve your psychological self. Q. You mean, one could transform into a mutant, into a person with higher knowingness, a person with major experiences? That is right. You can transform yourself into a mutant if you so desire. It all relies on knowing the system and the method, and that information is available in our institute. Q. Could you give us names of those people who you know have become, reached the state of mutants? Yes, there are some mentioned by history, and though you may not believe, because I am quite sure some of you will not believe it, the Count of Saint Germain, for example, lived in Europe during the 16th, 17th, 17th, and 19th centuries. He participated in the courts of all kingdoms, a friend of Marie Antoinette, friend of Louis XVI. In Australia, he is known as Prince Rakoski. If I told you Saint Germain is alive nowadays, the only thing I would expect is disbelief and excommunion, and for a good reason. People have never studied the science of mutants, that's obvious. But for us who have conducted our investigations in such a field, we know this is possible. To this day, people have only learned about the official science, and the official science is not the science of the universe. I don't think you believe universities control all there is to know, all the knowledge of the universe. College will give us experience to earn our living, but by no means controls all there is to know about our infinite cosmos. There is a difference between the official science and pure science. We have to realize and understand the official science is nothing more than the total of all the theories that were postulated and approved during our time, and those change constantly. Today, one theory could be it, and tomorrow, it is not. Pure science is something different. For us to participate in the theater of pure science, we need to open our interior mind. There is no doubt around the fact that mutants have opened their interior mind, and because of that, they can enter the theater of pure science and handle life. Modern scientists do not know how to handle or manage life. They know the mechanics and the phenomena of life because they have studied and analyzed living cells. But what do they know about the origin of life? Theories and theories, nothing else. They cannot demonstrate what is the origin of life. Theories and nothing but theories because they do not know the origin of life. One can theorize something, and another one can theorize something else as well, but no one can demonstrate what is the origin of life. They can also manage and handle the mechanics of a living cell, but not manage or handle its vitality. To manage the extent of vitality, you need to know pure science, and those who have experienced and opened their interior mind are taught about pure science. Whomsoever opens their interior mind enters the theater of cosmic science, becomes a wise man, in the most transcendental meaning of the word. With this, let's make a distinction between two groups of people, those who know official science and those who know pure science. Those who know official science will never believe those who are part of theater of cosmic science, will never accept them, and will never accept their sapience because the knowingness of those who have learned pure science goes far beyond the capability of those who have learned official science. To enter the theater of cosmic science, I say again, we have to open our interior mind. There are three mental centers or three minds. The first we can call sensual mind. This one elaborates its concepts from sensorial perceptions, and it knows nothing about that is real. The second is the intermediate mind. We deposit all our beliefs in the intermediate mind. Anyone could believe the sun exists, and some other person could believe the sun does not exist, but for the sun, it will make no difference if some believe or some other do not believe in him. The interior mind is something more important. Those who have opened their interior mind have a direct perception of what is real. The interior mind is cognition of the rudiments, of the fundamentals. It knows that that is real, and by opening our interior mind, we will be able to enter the amphitheater of pure science. Before that, it is not possible. If I tell you that the Count of Saint Germain lives with his immortal physical body, and I have the courage to state that, I am also absolutely sure that will not ever be believed. Why? Because there are only but few who have opened their interior mind. Those who have, do know Saint Germain exists. Q. Could you give us the name of anyone who could actually testify the existence of the Count of Saint Germain? On testimonials, there is a very serious one given by Giovanni Papini, the consented child of the Vatican, who, as a matter of fact, was excommunicated after writing his book, The Devil. He gives testimonial of the existence of Saint Germain. Giovanni Papini was a serious writer. As he traveled through the Indian Ocean on the year of 1939, recently after the beginning of World War II, he saw an enigmatic character on the ship's quarterdeck. He decided to talk to this character, and the man identified himself as the Count of Saint Germain. He even showed the papers that identified him as such. Saint Germain was on his way back to Rome, where men of the state had interviewed him. He, Saint Germain, had tried to convince them to not join the war, but they were so much into it that he resolved to go back to Asia. The ship made a stop in Calcutta, where Saint Germain disembarked. A group of venerable elders, Tibetan lamas who were looking for him, received him, and he left with them. Count Saint Germain told Giovanni Papini he would be back to the Occidental Hemisphere in 1999, but for the moment, he marched towards his sanctuary in Tibet. Mutants exist, believe it or not. Q. Master Samael Aun Weor. Why has there been so much emphasis in the year 1999? Even you mentioned it as you talked about Count Saint Germain. Nostradamus also mentions it as a year that will be decisive for humanity. What could you tell us about it? 1999 is a significant date. Nostradamus identifies 1999 as the year of the Great Catastrophe. He assures a terrible king will assault Paris from the skies. He refers, without a doubt, to Hercolubus, and Paris is deeply symbolical. He refers to our planet Earth in general. Nostradamus said, Earth will appear as if it were forced out of its orbit, referring to that year, and that there would be great darkness. Without a doubt, he refers to an eclipse. Obviously, as Hercolubus falls between the Earth and the Sun, an eclipse has to happen. Everyone, all students who have read his Centurias, await the date. However, the Mayans affirm that only during the Caton 13 will come that great catastrophe, and they await that to happen during the year 2043. As you can see, there are two concepts in question. One is from Michael de Nostradamus and the other from the Mayans of the Yucatan Peninsula. I personally believe this can all happen during the Caton 13. I stand behind the Mayans. Q. What could you tell our audience about karma? Well, karma is a word that means cause and effect. Every cause has its effect, and every effect can turn itself into a cause. That is karma, the law of action and consequence. Obviously, wrongdoing has bad consequences and good actions have good consequences. That is how the law of karma works. Each one of us is the builder, the creator of his own destiny. If we make the best use of present time, working with honesty and rectitude, we would create good dharma, a good destiny. We would have a wonderful destiny. If we do not make the best of present time, if we do not live life from instant to instant, we could create a disastrous karma. A man who knows how to live with rectitude, from instant to instant, who makes the best of each second of his life to work in favor of humanity, and who works to transform himself psychologically, is a man who is working to create a marvelous future for himself. Q. In the search for truth, many groups have appeared throughout the history of humanity. These groups have worked in secrecy. We could mention the Essenians, the Cathars, the Masons, and so on. What is the relationship that exists between these groups and the Gnostic association you represent? Well, the Gnostic Association of Anthropological and Cultural Studies, a civil association, AJAC in Spanish, respects all schools, organizations, sects, orders, etc. We know that if we do not work with the three factors for the revolution of our consciousness, we will not reach any logical conclusions. I emphatically refer to those three aspects that are birth, death, and sacrifice for humanity. Birth. It is necessary to create the man within each and every one of us. What we know as a man is not self-realized being. I am in agreement with something a college professor once told me. We are rational mammals. I believe that is an accurate definition. What would be interesting would be to create the man within ourselves, which is only possible by learning how to and transmuting our sexual energy, our sexual secretions. It is through sex that we reproduce ourselves. We are born through sex. We are born from a man and a woman. If we learn to transmute our sexual libido into creative energy, it would be possible to create within ourselves the real man. Friedrich Nietzsche talks about a Superman, but he made a big mistake. He forgot about the man. We need to create the man first, before we even think about the Superman. If we transmute the sacred sperm, the exioholly, we will generate the creative energy. Energy will condense in various forms of life. The creative energy, for example, on a higher octave, will condense as the famous astral body wise men of all ancient times have many times mentioned, men like Paracelsus, Philip Teofastro, Balmastro de Hominine. The astral body is not perceived through the eyes of our physical body, but those who have it know they have it. People know they have an astral body when they can use it to transport themselves out of their physical body towards any place within the infinite space. However, pictures have been taken of astral bodies, very good pictures taken with special lenses. On a higher octave, one above that of the astral body, the creative energy will condense in the mental body. The mental body will give us an individual intellect. One thing is to fill our heads with theories, and another is to have the spark of the true intelligence. On a higher third octave, the creative energy will condense or crystallize in the form of a causal body. Those who possess a causal body, or body of the conscious will, can determine, set, and originate circumstances upon will. They are no longer victims of circumstance. Anyone who possesses the physical, astral, mental, and causal body is able to receive the animic, Buddhic, or Christic principles, however we want to call them, and becomes a man, a real man, to the fullest extent of the word. Those who develop their sense of self-perception, psychological self-observation, are able to perceive the astral, mental, and causal bodies. But we need to possess these bodies in their totality, so we can become true men. Before that happens, we are nothing more than rational mammals, as that professor from the University of Mexico once said. That said, it is important to work on our own selves, our own psychologies, to become men. The second factor of the revolution of our consciousness is death, the death of our ego, by disintegrating it, reducing it to dust, to allow our divine being to be. Lastly, we need to raise the torch of wisdom to light the path of others, sacrifice for humanity. Any school that does not emphasize the work on those three factors for the revolution of our consciousness is obviously based on theories, and it will not reach any conclusion. If any organization forgets about any of these three factors, it serves no purpose. I do respect all organizations, from Orient to Occident. I only refer emphatically to those three factors, and I say that if there are any schools that do not know those three factors, they should learn them. That's all. Q. Master, much has been said about reincarnation, that we reborn time and time again until we complete our state of spiritual perfection. What could you tell us about this subject? With the utmost pleasure, I will address this most interesting question. For some, Reincarnation is a theory, for others an issue of faith, a belief, for others a superstition, for some others reason for sarcastic laughter. But for us who remember our previous existence, reincarnation is a fact. However, we need to make a distinction between the law of reincarnation and the law of the eternal returning. Reincarnation means the descent of divinity in a man. The repetition of this event is precisely that, reincarnation. I'll say that again. Incarnation is the descent of divinity in a man. When that event repeats itself, it is called reincarnation. This implies that reincarnation is only possible to men who are self-realized. Men like Jesus of Nazareth, Buddha, Hermes Trismegisto, Quetzalcoatl, etc. Returning is another thing, and to understand how do we return, I will speak briefly about death. Death is always the result of a subtraction of broken numbers. Once the mathematical operation is over, the only thing left is our values. Those values are absorbed by the eternity. They submerge within the psychological space, within the ultra of all things, within the superior dimensions of nature and the cosmos. Values attract and repel each other as stated by the laws of universal magnetization, and they return, reincorporate themselves into new organisms. That is the law of eternal recurrence, of the eternal returning of all things. Hand by hand with that law is another one called the law of recurrence. Everything happens again, just like it happened before. Life is like a movie. When you get to the time of death, you have simply returned to the original starting point. That movie is then absorbed by the eternity. Once the values return and they reincorporate themselves into existence, the same movie starts all over again. If we do not alter those values, the movie will go on without any changes. But if we manage to eliminate those false values, the movie can be modified. A man is what his life is. If a man does not work upon his own life, he is miserably wasting his time. We, the Gnostics, intend to make of our lives a masterpiece. When we do, we reach the final liberation, but we have to work upon ourselves, transforming our life, and that is only possible through the elimination of those unwanted psychic elements: anger, greed, lust, envy, pride, laziness, gluttony, etc. We have so many defects that even if we had 1,000 tongues and a palate made of steel, we would not be able to mention them all. We die and return, and we move according to the law of recurrence. Everything happens just like it happened before, with its consequence. Every existence is the repetition of a previous existence, plus its consequences. Those who get to remember their past existences will be able to validate what we have stated. On my behalf, I can say that I do remember my past existences. What I state is a fact. Hugh, could you talk to us about any of your previous existences? Some of them could be of importance, and some others may not. I do know that in my previous existence I was Daniel Coronado, that I was part of the Mexican Revolution, and that I have not forgotten anything that happened to me during that existence. Hugh, was that the one immediately before this one? The one immediately before this one. And if I started to tell you about all my previous existences, I am sure our audience will fall asleep. Think about what it represents to mention only one previous life. Names, history, the biography of all in existence, which is all too much. I will refrain myself to tell you that I do remember my past lives. Hugh, among the subjects that you study, there is one that relates to the development of the chakras. What could you tell us about that? The chakras, the magnetic vortices of men, are very important. There are 7 fundamental chakras, and awakening them is necessary. We must recognize that in our sacred sperm exists the most marvelous power able to transform us radically. These days, there exists a society within the United States called the Oneida Society. Medical scientific personnel are controlling the members of this society, and none of the participating males will ever make the mistake of ejaculating the ens seminis, the entity of semen. Sexual contact among couples of this society allows the connection of the lingam, but without the ejaculation of the ens seminis, ever. In the name of truth, they have investigated the physical organism of each of these individuals under a series of experiments, and they have found extraordinary results, excellent health being one of them. Thanks to this transmutation of their sexual energy, within the ens seminis is contained the ens virtutis of fire. As Paracelsus would say, the sacred sperm is transformed in creative energy. This energy rises up to the brain through determined channels related with the vague and sympathetic systems. Eventually, the solar and lunar atoms, the positive and negative atoms of the seminal current, make contact at the tribene, close to the coccyx, and by electrical inductance, a third force awakens. This third force is the kundalini, a subtle energy of an igneous nature, and ascends through the medullar spinal channel. As that subtle energy ascends, those magnetic vortexes or chakras awaken as they reside in the spinal column. The first chakra is related to the coccyx and with our creative organs. The second chakra is related with the prostate. The third chakra is related to the umbilical section. The fourth with the cardias. The fifth with the creative larynx. The sixth with the space between the eyebrows. The seventh chakra is related to the pineal gland. In each of these 7 vortexes reside extraordinary psychic faculties. In the first chakra, there are 7 psychic powers that give us control over the element earth. In the second chakra, prostate area, there are faculties that give us control over the element water. In the third chakra, umbilical area, there are faculties that, once awakened, give us control over the element fire. In the fourth chakra are contained certain powers that give us control over the element air. The fifth chakra contains the power to listen the ultra of all things, clairaudience. The sixth chakra contains the development of clairvoyance, which will allow us to see the ultra of the universe. The seventh chakra, related to the pineal gland, gives us the power to see the various dimensions of nature and the cosmos. Only through the transmutation of our sexual energy into creative energy it is possible to develop such powers, but only when we transmute our sexual libido, when we transmute our sacred sperm, is that we develop our creative energy. Many could object the transmutation of our sexual libido, originally proclaimed by Sigmund Freud in his psychoanalysis. But those of us who have accustomed ourselves to transmuting and developing our creative energy know there is magnificent truth behind it. It increases the potential vitality of the human organism. Q. You tell us about power over the elements, such as earth, water, air, and fire. Could you tell us what kind of power would that be? We have already mentioned the mutants. They have the power over the elements of nature as Jesus of Nazareth demonstrated it when he calmed the storms or walked over the waters in Galilee. They have the power over the elementals of nature as certain yogis of the Hindustan nowadays have demonstrated it. They walk over fire without getting burnt, or can float on air or walk through a rock without getting hurt. Many have given their testimonials after returning from India. Today there are still many orders, sects, groups, under the leadership of true mutants. Q. Master, do you think this humanity will have the time to reach the state of a Superman? If people propose themselves, they will. In our institution, we have all the precise rules to reach that state. We have the methods and the systems that will allow us to reach such heights. What is important is study and practice. Q. When a Superman reaches that state, what virtues does he possess? Such a man is distinguished by his modesty and simplicity. A Superman will never say what he is. He would prefer to go unnoticed. He would never attempt to make it public. The true Superman will fall under anonymity, will go unrecognized. A simple man in the most complete sense of the word. Master Samael Aun Weor, we would like to thank you for your participation in these studies at Radio University and for your humbleness while addressing our questions.